Oh hey, welcome to another edition of hand-laid tracks and 3D printed trains with Socrates. Today we're looking at 15 by 12 curved turnout end scale with a servo on the bottom and a bunch of wires hanging out underneath as well, because I do the wires from underneath now. Printed tie beds, printed servo mount there, screws in with little tiny screws, throw arm, 15 by 12 curved turnout. Somebody asked me if I could make one. I can. Kind of need one as well, so I just made the left, so I haven't made the rights. If anybody has a problem with the right ones, let me know. They should be identical, but I haven't tested it because I only needed the left. So it's got a good sized jig. Now originally these, when I first started making the turnouts whatsoever, I started with a fast tracks jig. And with the fast tracks jig, they only have the one, here's your isolation gap is cut through here and then through here because you have to isolate the frog. So with this one gap through here, they only have one PCB tie bed holding on these rails. And since I'm a bit old and clumsy, they kept coming off, especially because I wasn't that good at making these things originally. So the first thing I did when I made my own turnouts was I added a full length tie bed in there and a couple on the end, so this two frog pieces have at least 3 connecting points. And that's the same thing I did with this jig. And in some ways it came up, this is my 12 by 9, and it came out a bit long, but I also just sort of went a little extra with the ends on it. So if you want to make it shorter for some reason, if you have space considerations, you can always cut it off like that, and if needed I can make a shorter tie bed for you as well. And again, you could probably cut it off right about there as well. And one thing you'll notice in this, why the all little black dots, when I first made it, the inner pieces came out a bit short. I was real happy with the outer edges, but the inner pieces came out a little short. So what I've done, I've modified the jigs and all the pieces to make these about 2 millimeters longer, and the tie beds as well, so it fits a little bit better. I haven't tested it. It should be fine. If not, let me know and I'll definitely fix it. The whole system has a whole bunch of different tools and parts that make the whole thing work better. And one of my favorite things that I've added was the tie gapper and cutter. Still really proud of this thing because this is a huge pain. You have to make all the little tiny gaps, and the hardest ones are right in there. There's a couple tiny little gaps, and they have to all be gapped, and right in there there's 2 teeny tiny ones that have to be in the right place, and everything should line up. And as you'll notice, they line up pretty good in there. Quite happy with that. And to do that by hand is lots of work, takes forever, and it's just, I don't have that level of hand-eye skill anymore. So you have a 2-piece thing where you first put the naked ties, oops. So I use the Fast Trex PCB tie boards. I get the longest ones they make because I cut them down into length, and basically snip off a bunch of them. I usually file the far end of it just to make it clean using the Fast Trex big file, very good file, still use it all the time. And with the ends cut off and filed, you can basically flip it both ways. So put the long one in, snip it off, and then usually that'll fit one of the shorter pieces, hopefully. You'll almost always fit at least 2 pieces. And then once you have them all in there, hit it with that same big file on the top here, makes it all nice and smooth. And then basically this fits more or less on top of it, and pull them out one at a time and slip them into the gapper tool. And then with the triangle file, I used to use a Fast Tracks triangle, but I found that the German one I listed is in the description. This one actually works a little bit better. And real quick, you just go down the gaps and make sure you do all 3 of them. Of course, that one there is a little bit tough to get to. You sort of have to wiggle, wiggle, wiggle at it. But you can get all the 3 sets of gaps gapped, pop it out. I use a little wire brush to clean it off a little bit. And then again, with the big file, more or less put the tie beds on the file and zip it. There's the whole process is in a video. The number 6 is listed in the link. I have the whole number 6 built out. I don't video the first time I make a turnout because there's so many things that go wrong and so many things I have to change on the way that it's a little harder, and I'm not making a second one, so I'm not making a video of this particular build. But the number 6 is there, both the description as well as the ASMR version, which is the entire about 2-hour process all pieced together with no talking at all. The other jigs that are included is the point and frog cutter, and they have the word frog and point on the end so you know which way your rails are going into it. Basically, it's just it's kind of tight. It has M8 bolts and 2.5 or 25 millimeter or 2.5 centimeter length bolts with washers, and the nuts are pretty tight in there because they have to be. If it doesn't fit at first, you can take a deburring tool to take the edge around, and that helps them fit inside of it. But you want them snug as possible because when you tighten this thing down, it has to be pretty tight to hold it. And then again with that big file going across it, they have sort of an edge, so you can put there's a little block that goes with it as well that helps line it up. Although I think in the end, you can use another thing to line it up. But you can see where they should just stick out, and I have a cutout. Where is it? You can see it there. There's a little notch, so you know how far to make it. And then you just, once again with our big file, I go this way and then that way. So I'll do 8 this ways and then 8 that ways, and you file it nice and flat. And these have been working out very, very well. Again, I like the fast tracks are metal, and these being plastic are sacrificial. So when you get too close to it, you sacrifice the jig a little bit as opposed to sacrificing, the actual metal. I think it works a little bit better. And I was using their point tool, but then I realized when I was putting these up, I had to make a point tool as well. And in the end, again, I prefer the sacrificial nature. I've used this many, many times so far. It's only slightly worn out. And this is to make the stock rails. You have to make the edges of the stock rails because you have to cut the frogs, the diverging rails, and the stock rails. And those 2 tools will cut all those rails. And they do 2 rails. Well, this one does 1 rail at a time, but the other one does a pair at a time. And you can make the curved tracks however you want. I recommend the Rail Roller by Socrates. This is the small one. There's a large one and a small one. I ended up making the small one because I didn't like the way the large one sort of left little flats on the end, so I just shrunk it down. The large one definitely works better for HO and larger, and in fact this is really only designed for N scale. I added in the design, I changed it slightly so you see through, like, I don't know if there's, I think I left the other versions on it, but the newest version has this sort of reach around, and it makes it so the rails are much more squeezed in there. I did actually wear one of these out. I found that especially if you don't clean the tip of the rail, if there's any sort of flange, when you jam it through, you're just going to scratch it because it's still just plastic. And I found one wasn't laying flat anymore, so I had to reprint it. But again, I had used that one quite a few times, and they still definitely work very well. The other thing is the frog tip tool. So basically, once you've the best way to make it is you sort of make 2 long curved rails, one at 15 inch and one at 12 inches because it's a 15 by 12, and then you use that long piece of 15-inch curve for anything that is on that curve. So you have your one stock rail is a 15-inch, and then you have your one diverging / frog is a 15-inch. So your outer rail is a 15-inch, and this one here is 15. I know let's see. This one here is again 15. So your one diverging rail and frog is 15. And stock rail, and again this stock rail here is 12, and this one here is also 12. So you need a piece of 12-inch and a piece of 15-inch curved rails, and then you just sort of start cutting them up, and that way you can put them in. What I found actually was easier in the build process, because normally I put all the rails together and sort of solder it as a group, but I found it was with this long turnout that it was easier to put the stock rails in first and put a extra piece. So like for this 15-inch rail, stock rail, I put in another 15-inch all the way here, so the frog and diverging rail combined, and I could use the triangle, the triangle gauges, because you use the 3 triangle gauges to keep everything in line, and that helped keep the stock rail exactly where I wanted it most of the way down, and then remove that long piece, put in a long piece of 12 and the 12-inch stock rail, which also goes all the way to here, and you have to sort of adjust the curve as it comes through by hand. It's pretty easy, and it also fits the jig will force it into place as well, but it's also better to make it lay close as you can. But anyway, with that other 12-inch inner rail for the diverging and frog, you can use the triangle gauges, and that gets your outer rails, your stock rails, into better shape, because in the past I've had to readjust where the stock rails are, and this is better using the extra triangle gauges. Then you have all your PCB boards and your 2 stock rails in, and if you haven't cut it, you can use those 2 long pieces and then cut them into frogs and your diverging rails. So once you have your piece cut for your frog rail, and all it is basically a 12-inch and a 15-inch that just cut clean to length. It doesn't have to be, you want it longer than it's going to be in the end to adjust it. And you push them in here. The tip goes, about so far in, and you want it to push it as pretty much as far as you can without deforming it. You can sort of see when it gets in there nicely done. And there's a big clamp and block that goes on top of it, soldered in place. It should lift out. It kind of gets a little stuck, but I mean, you can see I used this one already, and it's not exactly that bad. And you sort of put a screwdriver behind it and sort of slowly leverage it out, and you can get it back out of there. And the way I do it with I like to have my frogs powered as well. Not of course this is an actual frog, but the frog legs here, because these are only going to be powered by whatever's attached to it to this side. So on especially a big turnout, I don't know, I have feeders on all my pieces. So I put 2 stock rail feeders, which work essentially for the entire piece, but if it's sitting with nothing else to it, you have to power the frog. So I put 2 on the frog as well, and 1 of course for the turnout for the isolated frog. And there's also included the the isolation gapper tools, because you have to gap the rail here and in between these 2 here. So I have a little tool that you can put into the vise that allows you to gap the rails a little easier. So basically it's a little V-notch. You put the track into it where you can see through the V-notch, and you can see where you're trying to cut. And then I have a little sacrificial piece that goes on the other side, and that way when you cut it, I usually put this side towards me so I can see what I'm doing. And when you cut it through the sacrificial, it really helps the jeweler's saw to go through it better. I use a jeweler's saw for it. I also got that from the same. It's also linked in the bottom. Has very nice thin blades, and I really like the way it works. So it's how I cut my isolation gaps with a jeweler's saw. This basically, it's loose. And you put it through the turnout, push it into the hole, tighten it up, give it a hard push, tighten this up, all while it's inside the gap, and then you go ahead and do it. Again, this is all in the video for the number 6, which is linked below, so you can see the whole process yourself. So that's a 15 by 12 curved turnout. You can make it yourself. Tie beds, jigs, gappers, all sorts of tools. Works pretty well. Tested this one out fine so far. Thought it worked great. Get it on Cults. Make yourself a curved turnout. Thanks for watching. Check it out next time. This was Curved Out Turnouts on hand-laid tracks and 3D printed trains. I really need a better song for the ending of the video, but I don't have one, so this is a song for the end of the video. Let's watch some trains. Ooh, trains. Soon, a bridge. Not yet, though. This was hand-laid tracks and 3D printed trains. In the end, I did not really refrain. I made a train, I made a print, I made a printed train. And I printed train. This was hand-laid printed tracks and 3D printed.